This is Trash Talk with your host, Garrett the Trash Man.
All right, what is up, everybody? I'm Garrett the Trash Man. You're listening to Trash Talk. What's up, John?
Oh, not much. Just another day in paradise.
You ready to do this?
Oh, let's do her to her.
All right, so we're going to flip the script because we've been doing this over a year, so we're going to start playing with a little bit different formats. And right now, we're just going to freaking dive right into the podcast topic.
Oh, yeah. Let's just get after it.
Just getting right after it, hitting the ground running, which today we're going to talk about having hard conversations and how we prep for them or what we do to be ready to have those hard conversations. Because in business or life, I think those come up a lot. Have you ever fired someone?
Yes.
All right. Have you ever corrected someone?
Many
Corrected some
times.
behavior? Have you ever had a discussion that you have feared hasn't been too pleasant with your wife? That you need to get something addressed?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think everybody, whether you're a business owner, how about have you ever had to have a discussion with a boss that you were afraid to go have?
Yes.
Yeah, so I've had all those conversations too. How about had a conversation with a person that you had a bunch of different domains with this person, meaning maybe you had to have a business conversation with a good friend that might not be a super easy conversation to have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not a ton of them, but yes.
Yeah.
I can give the big yes on that one.
So, like in life, like there's conversations that I'm going to say, quote unquote, can be like dicey conversations, or someone one time told me edgy conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And me being in a family business, like these edgy conversations can come up pretty often. I've had friends working for me. I feel like everyone that I work with is a friend, like at a certain level. So correction and certain things can feel really edgy. Especially going into them. And so as I thought of this topic, I'm like, I think this is everywhere in everyone's life.
Yeah.
You know, we've all probably had that sinking feeling where it's like, I've got to have this conversation. Maybe we're putting it off, waiting for the right time
Oh, yeah.
or anything like that. So I'll lob it over to you to start us off, like thinking back, and I haven't given you much time, so this is kind of off the cuff. What do you do when you know a conversation like of this? Let's use that edgy conversation, way of describing it. What do you do when you know an edgy conversation needs to be had? How's that occur for you?
In my experience, I would say I try to just get it over with. I try not to beat around the bush. I have beat around the bush more than once.
You're a rip off the Band-Aid type?
Yeah, I'd prefer to just, hey, get in here, let's do this, and get her done, because the more I think about it, the worse it typically goes.
Yeah.
So I first off, I feel like in my experience of what I've been through is absolutely let's just get her done. Let's get straight to the point. And so that's the first aspect, and then two is you're never going to come to the correct resolution being antagonistic.
Yeah.
So I always try to come into it prefacing it like, hey, listen, like let's come to a good understanding here. Let's hopefully leave this with a win-win situation, and that we're on the same page. It doesn't mean we love the result of this conversation, but at least we're on the same page. Mm-hmm. And so those are the things I typically go into. It's just let's just get it done. Try not to be antagonistic, and go about it that way. But just say, hey, listen, let's communicate correctly, and be as direct as we can without being antagonistic. Mm-hmm. And so, those are probably the first.
So how do you be direct?
Things.
So say someone's like had an issue, like they're not performing how they ought to perform. How do you be direct without being antagonistic?
I typically try and first show understanding to them, but then show them the situation from a third person point of view. Mm-hmm. I typically say someone, did something in their job that they shouldn't have, and they did it, incorrectly, and it's in a way that really needs to be fixed. Tell them, listen, this is what you did. Okay? Let's not look at it from my perspective. Let's not look at it from your perspective. Let's look at it from either the client's or third person point of view and realize and come to understanding that, guess what? You screwed the pooch.
Yeah.
Everyone screws the pooch. It's okay. We all make mistakes. But here's the issue. And then once they can kind of realize and say, okay, yeah, I did screw the pooch, then we can come to an understanding of, okay, we're on the same page that, this is what there is something wrong here.
Yeah.
Now, how are we going to fix it?
You're in agreement that,
Yeah.
something happened how you wouldn't have it happen. Excuse me. Oh, sorry. Cold's been going around my family.
Yeah, yeah.
Hasn't hit me hard, hit the rest of the family hard. But,
Oh, yeah.
No, I like what you're saying there. Because if you can take a person and try to pull them out of it in a way where they're not so tied up in the emotions, you've got a lot better chance of them not being spun up. And once they're spun up, you don't have access to them. They're not going to be listening to what you say at all.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Now, I've also had hard conversations with someone that I have much more emotional ties to, whether that's a family member or a very dear friend or someone I'm very close with. And in those instances, I try to be uber blunt.
Yeah.
Of just, hey, this is what I have seen, I've experienced, and just be super blunt so that it's out in the open.
Yeah, and I've got a couple things to say to that because I agree completely. I have had need to have like a conversation with someone to really terminate them actually, and in the past I've led on and not being blunt like you said, and so they come into the offense like, hey, how are you doing? I'm doing good. How are you? Oh yeah, this yada yada, and then it's like, and then beating around the bush and getting to it, and it's such a painful process where it's so much better where if I'm bringing someone in to let them go, there's none of that. It's like, hey, come in, we need to have a conversation. How are you? Fine. We need to, let's get into this. We need to have a discussion. I don't let us wander off into the pleasantries of acting like there's nothing and then whap them with a blind side. In my experience, that is so much worse.
Oh, yeah.
Than and what happens for me, which this is all going to tie back in, is if I'm not being awake to it, my desire will be that they leave happy somehow, and not just being like, all right, like I'm committed to this outcome, and they may not be happy in the moment. And in the past, I've tried to let someone go and like us be friends at the end. And it's like that's a possibility, but it's not going to come from like pandering to them or beating around the bush, or it may be something that takes time. So anyway, what I wanted to dive into a little bit is I think of the things I'm committed to in my life, which top is myself. Second is that my wife lives a happy and fulfilled life. Third is that I have deep and meaningful relationships with my children. Fourth is that I have deep and meaningful relationships in all aspects of my life. And fifth is that I build wealth. And so when I look at that fourth one, I found that it's present when I've got to have those hard conversations. And something a coach told me once that has stuck with me and served me so well is he asked me like the aspects of a deep and meaningful relationship. And there was respect, love, different aspects that we talked about. And nowhere in there was that person likes me. like it really wasn't. Like a person can actually not like me and we can have a deep and meaningful relationship. And coming to that conclusion, I was actually working with this coach when I needed to let someone go. And as we discussed it, I was like, holy cow, I can have someone not like me, and generally they come back around to do like me, but they won't we won't have a deep and meaningful relationship if it's based on something that's fake and it's out of alignment with me.
Oh, I like that.
And it was so, and in a particular situation that I'm thinking about, the relationship was maintained and intact because I was able to go about it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I sat to have the conversation, and this is kind of what I wanted to get to, I don't know how many points are going to be here, but I'll take a real epistemological approach of like, here's the steps to do it that I've found useful for me is first, slow myself down to look at everything I'm committed to in what I want to produce with the conversation that I want to have. So if it's an employee that's got to be corrected, like I'm not just looking at the outcome that I need to have for the business. Yes, I'm committed to the business. I'm committed to it doing well. And that doesn't serve it, so that behavior needs to be corrected. And in that same time, I can recognize that I want that person to also be honored in the work that they do, the effort that they put forward, that they feel heard with the decision that they made, that they feel like they're understood and why they took those actions. And when I slow myself down and consider the whole thing, not just the one section of like the business has got to be fixed, I can go into that conversation, and you alluded to this when you were talking, and I can speak to that.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one, like I said, I'll take an epistemological approach and lay it out in steps. The first step of slowing myself down and considering everything that's there as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second is to start that conversation speaking to that.
Yeah.
Like, hey Bob, I want to have a conversation with you about your performance in the business. Can we set that up? And we sit down and it's like, all right, Bob, like I want to have a conversation about some performance that I've been seeing. And in this conversation, I want to be sure that you are heard. You have the experience that I understand why you make certain decisions. I want you to have the experience that you work for someone that honors the work you put in and the sacrifice it takes to come in every day and do your job day in, day out. And I want to make sure that the business is absolutely served, that the right people are in the right seats, that the right decisions are being made, and that we do the best thing we possibly can for the business and the customers.
Mm.
And I've just done so extremes of hard conversations
Yeah.
that it's incredible what can be produced out of a conversation when you first slow yourself down and then create with your language by putting it out there with
Mm-hmm.
that person.
Yeah.
And then the third step that I would say in that is, as you're going through the conversation, check in, stop the conversation and check in on those things that you spoke to that you're committed to.
Mm-hmm.
That, man, I've found that so useful, whether it's with my wife or employees or whatever it is, bosses, to go, okay, like we're in the middle of this and I want to pause real quick and like see how this is going for you over there. Like, do you feel like are you having the experience that I'm understanding why you make that decision?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's been so instructive to me at times. 'Cause sometimes they're like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I feel like you see what I'm seeing here, and now I can see what you're seeing there. And other times it's been like, no, you're not listening to me.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, great. I want to listen to you. Tell me more. Let me ask more questions. Let me understand more.
Well, just a side note right there, real quick. The thing that I've seen in having tough conversations with anybody really is if you can bring that clarity into the conversation. A lot of times, people, before you even actually have to talk to them about whatever it is that needs to be remedied or bring to forefront the issue, once the clarity is there, they already know it. Like,
Yeah.
that you half the time it's already said before it's said.
Yeah, yeah.
And the clarity goes, and it's like a light bulb moment for people, and they go, ah, okay.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times if you're ending up in some of those dicey situations, it's work wasn't done properly in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got agreements set up in the way that they ought to be set up and you're holding people accountable and you're keeping your side of the agreement of this is what happens if you don't keep your side, like there's no surprise conversations. But we know life is there's a lot. It's hard to cover everything, and so at times you land in those.
Yeah.
And I think we've said it before, or I have many times. I'll be in a conversation, realize I just wasn't clear enough on my agreement. Like
Yeah.
that person was doing what they thought was exactly what needed to be done, keeping the agreement perfectly, and I'm instructed on how to be more clear.
Absolutely.
And so going back to the conversations though, both when I've executed it well and when I've executed it horribly. There's a book. I think the book is called Traction, or it might be Scaling Up. One of the two books. Both of them are books that talk about business systems.
Mm-hmm.
And in one of them, it may be both too. I don't know. It talks about. I want to say they called it the 42, or maybe it was the 72 hours of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about how those hard conversations, whether it's letting someone go, adjusting a role, or in the business aspect, or if it's at home, having a conversation that's tough, no matter how tough the conversation is, the max amount of pain after having the conversation is like 48 hours.
Yeah.
And then it's cleared up and cleaned up and you're better off. And I don't know if you've ever done this, but I've put myself through weeks of pain not having the conversation that needs to be had. And
I've done months.
yeah, fake conversations in my head
Oh.
where I can't sleep and I'm having fake
Oh, it's
conversations.
the pits.
Oh, anytime that happens, anytime I'm realizing I'm up at 2 o'clock at night having fake conversations in my head, I'm like, okay, it's time to go have some conversations.
Yep.
So, like we've talked about action so many times, and man, the whole timing thing and waiting and such an illusion.
Well, and the reason that was like one of the first things I said about it is just cut to the chase and get to it, is because I have drug it out forever, and it's just painful. It so much unnecessary anxiety and stress and worry of when am I going to do this, when finally it's just like, let's just get it done.
Yeah.
Just bite the bullet, rip the Band-Aid off, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, well, and anytime I think about anytime anyone's given me instruction or got to have a conversation with me, like, I want to know as soon as possible if correction needs to be made or if a hard conversation needs to be had. I wouldn't want it to be drug out. I've also been in conversations where someone's beating around the bush. And I'm like, dude, like, you don't think I can handle it? Tell me what you got to tell me, and let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
And so it's so funny when you sit on that side, you'd so much rather have it that way.
Yeah.
When you're on the other side, you think you're gonna some way be able to like dance around it, where it's like no one ever feels bad or anything.
Yeah, they're gonna come in at the perfect time of day, sit down and say to you, "Oh, I feel like you need to talk to me about something important." That's what you tell yourself in your head.
Oh, yeah.
And then you're like, "Yeah, I'm an idiot for thinking that.
Yeah.
That's not gonna happen."
It's not how life works. Yeah. So, to kind of just wrap it up, like I would say, don't wait for perfect timing. When you see it, act on it. That being said, slow yourself down. Consider everything that you want to have in the conversation. Speak to it to begin the conversation. Check in on it during the conversation, and make sure that you hit what you are committed to when you're done with the conversation.
I couldn't agree more.
And if it does cause pain, like I said, it'll be 48, 72 hours of pain. And if your intention is to have a relationship, even if they leave fighting mad, that relationship has a much better chance of being meaningful than if it was built on inauthenticity and was out of alignment for either party.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that.
Boom! All right,
Bet.
dude. So we're trying this new format. So if we're done with the topic of the podcast, let's rant real quick, dude.
Oh, dude, let's do it too. Who goes first?
Flip a coin, Tyler. Who goes first? Johnny!
I love that. Okay, so I got my rant today is on a book I'm in the middle of, and it's an old book. It is called The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino.
Og.
And it's a really interesting book. It's very similar to it's kind of got a little bit of the Richest Man in Babylon vibe to it.
Nice.
But I was reading last night, and it really kind of just jumped out and and kind of spoke to me of a concept. So basically, to kind of preface a little bit, he's reading and learning some principles in this part of the book. The main character is, and basically what they're trying to get across to us is that that he's talking about experiences and and the goal of the book is to help this guy become the greatest salesman in the world. And the time frame it's set is back in like the biblical times.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about it starts talking about experience in life and gaining experience, and it talks about how experience is a great teacher, but to not rely upon experience, because experience is like fashion. It may work tomorrow, but
Love what you're saying.
But tomorrow it'll be outdated.
Mm-hmm.
And that, yes, you can learn from your experience, but not to rely upon it, but to govern your life by principles. Which, yes, I agree with that wholeheartedly, but the way it was communicated in that sense was like, wow, like light bulb moment for me. And it was really interesting. He goes on to talk about how, gaining experience is having successes and failures. Well, guess what? And he says this also of, you can go into a room of 1,000 men and no 2 men are going to explain success the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all going to explain failure the exact same way.
That's interesting.
And so that's why he says, yes, learn from your experience. Experience is good, but govern your life by principles that are tried and true and have been bringing people their own success for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, that was deep. Like, man, that really struck me of just like, which I've agreed with this for a long time, of live your life by, like, decide the principles you want to live your life by. And I'm not saying what principles are good and bad. Just agree upon your own principles.
Mm-hmm.
And live by them.
I love it, dude.
And so that's my rant. But yeah, it's a good book. I'm not done with it. But yeah, it's Og Mandino, and it's the greatest salesman in the world.
Gonna have to give her a listen.
Yeah, it's a good one.
All right, sweet, dude. Well, I'm gonna be quick because I gotta go home. I gotta get a shower. If you're watching the video, watch the video so you can check out my sweet running shorts.
Yes, I love the shorts. They're great. I was hoping we'd get to the shorts real quick.
But I gotta go shower, so I'm gonna be quick on this. Because I just want to talk real quick about judgment. I've been looking at judgment, trying to root it out in my life, because it's something that happens. You're not going to outrun judgment. It happens unconsciously, but you can make a decision with how you interact with it. And so I've been consciously working on when I see judgment enter into my life, into my thoughts, looking at it instead of passing judgment, looking at it with a question mark. Going, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that person made that decision? I wonder what led them to make that decision. And what it's produced is a lot of empathy and made the judgment really melt away. Whether it's from a moral standpoint or a like intellectual standpoint, like whatever it is, seeing it and doing that, because in the digital world where we get access to so many people's lives or what they hold themselves out to be in their lives.
The perception they put out.
There's so much opportunity. I don't know if it's more than there used to be, but there is now. That's all I know, because it's all the world I've lived in. Mm-hmm. I know there's so much opportunity to judge others. And like I said, I wouldn't want to judge myself for judging others, because it happens unconsciously. It just automatically happens. And so I just want to encourage you guys, because it's been a useful practice for me. Replace that judgment with curiosity. Wonder why. That's so interesting that person would do that. Wonder why they would do X, Y, and Z. Wow. And like, you can learn so much from people, and it makes you love people and have empathy for them. And it's just more fulfilling to live life that way, instead of, oh my gosh, freaking look at them, what an idiot, or what a hoe, whatever it is, where the judgment just gets passed. Get rid of that. Replace it with curiosity. So that's what I got for today.
I love it. Love it.
Real quick, so we can get it under the 30 minutes so Tyler doesn't have to end the recording. Larson Waste, thank you for sponsoring this podcast. hit them up. We're up to big things, working our faces off for you, catching our breath a little bit, to be honest with you, but we're gearing up for springtime. It's going to be big. So, yeah, Larson Waste, thank you for sponsoring this podcast. Please share the podcast. Get the Trash Man, 1R, 2Ts, across all the platforms.
All of them.
That's all I got to say, John.
Peace out, guys.
Peace!